The year was 593 BC. A defeated people sat by the banks of the Chebar River in Babylon. They were exiles, their temple burned, their king humiliated, their land stolen. They were supposed to be the chosen ones, yet now they were nothing but captives. And among them sat a priest named Ezekiel, a man who had lost everything. But on one ordinary evening, as the desert wind tore across the plain, the sky above him began to change. At first, it seemed like a storm, dark clouds rolling in, thunder shaking the ground. But this was no storm Ezekiel had ever known. The wind screamed as if alive, twisting sand into whips that stung his face. The horizon split with a flash. Fire, but fire that did not consume. Flames that seemed to breathe, to move with intention. And at the heart of the storm, lightning tore open the heavens in patterns too precise, too deliberate to be natural. The exiles scattered, covering their heads, running from what they thought was destruction. But Ezekiel could not run. His body shook, his knees buckled, yet his eyes would not close. Something inside him knew this was not weather, this was a doorway. Then he saw them. Out of the living fire emerged shapes, 4 immense figures, blazing and impossible. Each one looked human, yet not human. Each had 4 faces, a man, a lion, an ox, an eagle, gazing in every direction at once. Wings unfolded like storms themselves, and when they moved, the sound was not of feathers, but of armies marching, oceans roaring, and thunder rolling into one. Ezekiel fell to the ground, clutching his head. His heartbeat pounded in his ears, yet he could hear their movement, their unity. They did not move like living things, but as if bound together by a single will, turning as one, stopping as one, eyes fixed on him. And then, beside them, wheels. Not ordinary wheels, but wheels within wheels, spinning in every direction at once, defying gravity and logic. Each wheel shone like burnished metal, alive with fire, and covered in eyes that blinked and stared into Ezekiel's soul. He tried to look away, but there was no escaping them. Those eyes did not just watch him, they judged him, weighed him, pierced into every secret thought he had ever buried. The storm raged, the creatures thundered, the wheels spun with impossible motion. And then Ezekiel saw above them something even greater, a vast expanse, glowing like crystal, stretched out like the sky itself, shimmering with a brilliance that crushed all human language. And above that expanse, a throne that burned like sapphire, radiating fire and light. On it sat a figure. Ezekiel's mouth went dry, his body went limp. The figure looked like a man, yet not a man. From the waist up, blazing like molten metal. From the waist down, fire pouring out like a furnace. Encircled by brilliance, engulfed in glory, brighter than any sun. Ezekiel collapsed, his face pressed into the dust, because he knew no human could gaze on such a sight and live. The air itself seemed to scream. A voice spoke, not through air, not through sound, but inside him, breaking through flesh and bone. And in that moment, Ezekiel knew this was no dream, no hallucination. This was the throne of the Almighty. But why him? Why now? Why here in the land of exile, far from the temple, far from Zion? Why did God rip open the heavens not for priests in Jerusalem, not for kings in palaces, but for a broken man by a river in a foreign land? What did this vision mean? Were these creatures angels? Were the wheels some symbol or some reality beyond dimensions we can grasp? And that throne, who sat upon it? Ezekiel was chosen to see what no mortal eyes should see. And from that day, his life and the fate of his people would never be the same again. But what message was hidden in the storm, the fire, the creatures, the wheels, the throne? And perhaps the more terrifying question, was Ezekiel the only man to ever glimpse the throne room of God? Or has this vision echoed across time, pointing to the very end of the world? The year was 597 BC. Babylon had conquered Jerusalem. The holy city of David had fallen. The temple, the house of God himself, was stripped of its treasures, its doors torn open, its golden lampstands dragged through the dust. The chosen people, who once believed they were untouchable, had been chained and marched across the desert like cattle. Among them was Ezekiel, a young priest, born into a line of men who were supposed to serve in the sanctuary. He had trained his whole life for the priesthood, to wash in holy water, to light the incense, to speak blessings before the ark. Yet now there was no ark, no temple, no sacrifices, no homeland. Instead of priestly robes, Ezekiel wore the dirt of exile. Instead of temple walls, he sat beside the Chebar River, a canal in Babylon, surrounded by dust, tears, and despair. Imagine what that felt like. You are chosen by God, your fathers are chosen, your land is promised. And then suddenly, all of it is ripped away. The world tells you, your God is dead, your temple is ash, your people are nothing. The Babylonians laughed at the captives. They had their own gods, towering statues of Marduk and Ishtar, and those gods seemed victorious. The exiles whispered among themselves, "Has Yahweh abandoned us? Has he been defeated?" It was in this darkness, when faith was at its lowest point, that the heavens chose to tear open. But pause for a moment. Why Ezekiel? Why here? Why reveal the unimaginable throne of God, not in Jerusalem, not in a holy temple, but in the land of exile, where God's people felt abandoned and mocked? This is one of the most shocking truths of the vision. God does not always reveal his glory in victory. Sometimes he reveals it in humiliation. Ezekiel was 30 years old when the vision came, the very age when priests would normally begin their service in the temple. Instead, he was thousands of miles away, unable to fulfill his calling. To Ezekiel, it must have felt like his entire life's purpose was stolen before it began. And yet, in that moment of despair, God broke open the skies and said, "You may not serve in Jerusalem, but you will serve me in Babylon." This is the paradox. When humans think God is absent, he is closer than ever. Ezekiel looked up into the storm and saw what no king in Israel ever saw, what no priest in Jerusalem ever witnessed. He saw the throne of God. But here is the question. Why reveal it in exile? Why not appear in the temple before the multitudes in all his glory? Why to one man, sitting in the dirt of captivity? Could it be that God was showing something greater than national pride? Could it be that his throne was never confined to walls of stone or gold? This is where the vision becomes explosive. The Jews believed the temple in Jerusalem was the dwelling of God. The Babylonians believed their idols carried their gods. But Ezekiel's vision shattered both beliefs. It revealed a God who was not trapped in temples, not defeated by exile, not bound by location. His throne was alive, mobile, moving, a throne that rode storms and fire, a throne that could follow his people even into captivity. Think about that. In a foreign land surrounded by enemies, Ezekiel learned the truth that God's throne was not stationary. It was everywhere. It was with him. But imagine the fear. You expect silence. You expect absence. Instead, the sky splits, fire roars, creatures emerge, and you see what no human should see. How do you even begin to describe it? How do you convince others that it was real? And yet Ezekiel did. He wrote it down, and his words have haunted readers for centuries. But here's the real question we must ask ourselves. Was this vision meant only for Ezekiel in Babylon? Or was it a glimpse of something greater? A vision meant for every generation to remind us that God's throne is never far away. If so, then what does it mean for us today? When nations fall, when temples burn, when faith seems broken, is it possible that God's throne is still moving, still alive, still present, even when the world tells us he is gone? The heat of Babylon was suffocating. The exiles gathered by the Chebar Canal, their heads bowed, their voices low. Some muttered prayers, others cursed the heavens. Ezekiel sat among them, weary, hollow-eyed, trying to quiet the storm inside him. Then the air changed. It began with a sound, Not thunder, not yet, but a low hum, deep, unnatural, vibrating through the ground itself. The hairs on Ezekiel's arms rose. The canal water rippled, though no wind blew. And then he looked up. On the horizon, a storm was forming, but not like any storm he had seen in Judah. This one was alive. A massive cloud rolled toward them, black and thick, boiling with fire from within. Lightning exploded across it, not random but patterned, as if obeying an unseen command. The fire did not consume the cloud. It danced inside it, glowing, pulsing, alive. The exiles screamed and fled. Mothers clutched children, men covered their heads. Some cried, "The gods of Babylon have come." Others whispered, "This is judgment." But Ezekiel could not move. His feet were anchored to the ground, his eyes locked on the storm, because in his spirit he knew this was no Babylonian god. No idol of stone or wood could command fire and lightning. This storm was something else. The wind hit first, a violent blast that tore through the camp, ripping tents from the ground, sending sand and ash into the air. Ezekiel staggered, shielding his face. But he refused to look away. The sky was splitting open, and he had to see what was coming through. The storm advanced like a living wall. It did not scatter across the land like normal clouds. It moved with direction, with will, with intelligence. And from its blazing heart, Ezekiel saw shapes, shadows flickering in the fire, figures straining to break through. He blinked, his breath catching in his throat. The shapes became clearer. Out of the fire emerged something impossible. 4 immense beings, their forms half human, half otherworldly. Their bodies gleamed like burnished bronze, glowing in the light of the storm. They moved with strength, yet their motion was strange, synchronized, deliberate, terrifying. Each figure had 4 wings. 2 stretched upward, touching one another as if forming a shield of unity. 2 covered their bodies, concealing whatever form lay beneath. And beneath those wings, a sound thundered, the crack of storms, the roar of armies, the rushing of mighty rivers. But it was their faces that froze Ezekiel's soul. For each had not 1 face, but 4. A man, a lion, an ox, an eagle, all at once, gazing in every direction. He could not escape their sight. Wherever he turned, one of their faces was watching. Human intelligence in one, animal power in another, fierce majesty in the rest. Ezekiel's knees gave way. He collapsed to the ground, trembling. His mind screamed, "These are not men. These are not beasts. What are they?" Yet he knew the truth. They were not demons, not idols. They were alive with holiness. But still, why reveal such terror? Why not appear in gentleness, in comfort, in peace? Why unveil such beings of fire and thunder to a broken exile? The storm intensified. Fire shot from the creatures, blazing across the sky, illuminating the desert as if the sun itself had fallen to earth. The exiles wailed in terror, "Flee! Into the hills!" But Ezekiel could not flee. His body was frozen, his spirit locked in place. Then he saw what accompanied the beings. Beside each one, touching the ground, was a wheel, not like the wheels of carts or chariots. These wheels were immense, shining like crystal and bronze, glowing in the firelight, and inside each wheel was another wheel set crosswise, allowing them to move in any direction without turning. Ezekiel's heart pounded as the realization hit him. These were not ordinary wheels. They were alive, covered with eyes, dozens, hundreds, blinking and staring, rolling and watching in every direction. The eyes turned toward him. They saw him. They knew him. Every secret thought, every hidden sin, every memory, all of it was laid bare before the eyes of the wheels. Ezekiel gasped, clutching his chest as if his soul was being torn open. And yet, the creatures moved without hesitation. Wherever the spirit went, they went. Wherever the wheels moved, the creatures followed. They were not separate. They were bound together by one command, one power, one will. And in that moment, Ezekiel realized the truth. This was not chaos. This was not madness. This storm was order, terrifying, unstoppable order. The sky was no longer sky. It was a doorway. And through that doorway, God's throne was descending. But Ezekiel had not yet seen it. Not fully. The storm was only the herald. The fire was only the curtain. The creatures and wheels were only the guardians. What lay above them? That was the true revelation. Ezekiel pressed his face into the dirt, shaking, unable to breathe. The storm roared. The creatures thundered. The wheels spun with impossible precision. His body screamed to look away, but his soul whispered, "You must look. You were chosen to see this." He raised his eyes once more, and there, above the storm, above the creatures, above the wheels, he saw something that made every nerve in his body scream in terror and awe. A vast expanse, a shining sea of crystal, stretched out above the heads of the beings, glowing with unimaginable light. It separated heaven from earth, the divine from the mortal. And above that expanse, a throne, radiant as sapphire, burning with brilliance that no human tongue could capture. Ezekiel's heart nearly stopped. The throne of God was before him. But what kind of God rides a throne carried by living creatures and wheels of fire? Why reveal such cosmic terror to an exile in Babylon? And more dangerously, who was seated upon that throne? The storm blazed, the sky split, and the four beings stood before Ezekiel in their impossible form. He could not look at them directly for long. Every glance revealed something new, something more disturbing, as though his eyes were not built to contain what he was seeing. He blinked, and in that instant he thought he saw human forms, like great warriors of bronze, shining, alive. He blinked again. Now beasts, wings unfurled, faces shifting, fire curling around them. It was as if every image of power he had ever known had been fused into one. Each creature had four faces. The first, a man, calm, unyielding, full of intelligence. The second, a lion, teeth bared, the king of the wild. The third, an ox, strength unbroken, servant yet powerful. The fourth, an eagle, fierce, soaring, untouchable. Together they embodied humanity, wildness, labor, and majesty, the fullness of creation itself. Ezekiel tried to steady his breathing, but the sight suffocated him. He had heard of angels in stories, messengers of God with wings of light, but nothing had prepared him for this. These were not the gentle angels of bedtime prayers. These were guardians of the throne, beings designed not for comfort but for awe, for terror, for holiness. Their wings beat with such force the air itself shook. When they moved, the sound was not of flight, but of earthquakes, of armies marching, of oceans colliding with cliffs. It was the sound of unstoppable power, and when they stopped, silence fell instantly, heavy and crushing, as if the world itself held its breath. Ezekiel's body convulsed. He pressed his forehead into the ground. He wanted to hide, to bury himself in the dust, but some greater force commanded him to lift his eyes. Trembling, he obeyed, and the creatures turned toward him. All four faces, all four directions, and every one of them looking at him at once. Ezekiel's lips quivered. His voice cracked into a whisper, "What are you?" But no answer came. Only the thunder of wings, only the blazing fire that curled around their bodies and shot forth like lightning. And then came the strangest detail, their movement. Ezekiel watched as one of the beings advanced, but it did not step forward like a man. It did not turn like a beast. Instead, it glided straight, without turning, as though space itself bent to their will. The others followed, moving in perfect unity, each one turning without turning, advancing without shifting their gaze. It was motion that defied human understanding. The wheels beside them spun in harmony, rolling wherever the beings moved, eyes blinking and glowing across their rims. They turned in every direction at once, and yet they never collided, never lost balance, never faltered. Ezekiel felt his sanity breaking. How could this be real? Were these visions of the mind, illusions brought by grief, or were his eyes truly seeing another dimension tearing into his own? But deep inside, he knew. This was not madness. This was revelation. The creatures were not beasts, not demons, not illusions. They were alive with the Spirit of God. They did not move on their own. They did not think separately. They were bound together by something greater, as though one voice, one command, one will ruled them all. And then came the most chilling thought. If these were merely the attendants of the throne, the guardians who carried the glory of God, what then of the throne itself? The fire roared, the lightning tore the sky, the creatures thundered with every beat of their wings. Ezekiel's body shook until he thought his bones would snap. He collapsed again, his face pressed hard into the dirt, tears streaming into the dust. But he could not escape the vision. His spirit was gripped, chained, commanded to see. He lifted his eyes once more. Above the creatures stretched a great expanse, like crystal, shining, shimmering, alive with the light of heaven. It glittered with a brilliance that shattered language, and yet it was clear, solid, unmoving, like a barrier between the mortal and the divine. And above that expanse, a throne, radiant, burning, alive. Ezekiel gasped. His vision blurred. His body screamed for release. He wanted to close his eyes, but he could not. He was chosen to see. He was chosen to witness. The creatures thundered below. The wheels spun with eyes unblinking. The storm raged. The fire blazed. And above it all, the throne burned like sapphire, its brilliance pouring across the sky. Ezekiel collapsed again, choking on his own breath, knowing the next sight would be the most terrifying of all. Because now, for the first time, he realized the storm and the creatures were only the beginning. They were not the revelation. They were the introduction. The true horror, the true glory, the true vision was yet to be seen. And the question clawed at his mind. If the guardians of God's throne are this terrifying, this overwhelming, this beyond comprehension, what will the king himself look like? Ezekiel's heart was pounding. The thunder of wings shook the earth, the fire blazed, the storm roared, but his eyes were drawn to something stranger still. The wheels. At first glance, they seemed like chariot wheels, round, gleaming, immense. But as Ezekiel's vision cleared, he realized they were unlike anything he had ever seen. Each wheel was a wheel within another wheel, one intersecting the other, glowing like polished bronze set aflame. They did not merely roll forward or backward. They spun in every direction at once, moving north, south, east, and west without ever turning. They glided through the air with precision, their motion flawless, as if obeying laws of a universe Ezekiel could not comprehend. And then he saw the eyes. They were everywhere, covering the rims, the spokes, the very surface of the wheels. Dozens upon dozens, blinking, glowing, unblinking again. Some wide and fierce, others small and piercing, yet all of them alive, and all of them staring. Ezekiel froze. Those eyes were not decoration. They were not symbols. They were watching him. He felt the weight of their gaze pierce his soul. Every hidden thought, every shame, every buried memory was dragged into the open. He could not hide. He could not lie. Before those eyes, his heart was an open scroll. He gasped, clutching his chest. His knees buckled beneath him. For a moment he thought he was dying, that his very soul was being judged and stripped bare. The wheels moved again, rolling where the creatures moved, gliding as though gravity itself was their servant. The eyes turned as they moved, never losing focus, never distracted. Each blink was purposeful, deliberate, terrifying. And then Ezekiel noticed something else. The wheels did not move on their own. They moved in perfect unity with the four living creatures. When the creatures advanced, the wheels advanced. When the creatures rose from the earth, the wheels rose with them. They were bound together, body and spirit, motion and command. Wherever the spirit went, the wheels followed. Ezekiel trembled. He knew what it meant. These wheels were not mere objects. They were alive with the Spirit of God. But what were they? Why would God's throne be carried by such strange, impossible creations? Why cover them with uncountable eyes? Was it a symbol, a way of showing that God sees everything, that his presence moves everywhere, unstoppable, unbound by temples or lands? Or was it more than symbol? Did Ezekiel truly glimpse another dimension, another form of life created not for earth but for heaven? The eyes burned into him, demanding an answer. Some say the wheels meant God's omniscience, his all-seeing knowledge, his ability to watch every nation, every person, every soul. Others say they represented his omnipresence, his throne able to move across the earth, unhindered, untouchable, carried by living power. Still others whisper that Ezekiel saw something beyond time itself, something not meant for human comprehension. Ezekiel's breath shook. He wanted to close his eyes, to look away, but he could not. He was chosen to witness, chosen to see what no mortal was meant to see. The wheels glowed brighter, spinning faster, fire curling from their rims. The eyes widened, unblinking now, locked upon him. And in that moment, he felt the terrible weight of truth. This throne was not bound to Israel. This throne was not defeated by Babylon. This throne was not contained by heaven or earth. This was the throne of the Almighty, a throne that moved wherever it willed, a throne that saw all, a throne that no nation, no king, no empire could escape. Ezekiel collapsed again, face to the dirt, trembling in fear and awe. The ground itself felt alive beneath him, pulsing with fire and thunder. Above the storm, the expanse glittered like crystal, stretching out in unimaginable brilliance. And above that expanse, the throne burned brighter still. Ezekiel squeezed his eyes shut, but the vision burned inside him. He had seen the storm. He had seen the creatures. He had seen the wheels of fire, alive with eyes that pierced his soul. But the greatest revelation was still before him. Because if the wheels and creatures carried the throne, then who sat upon it? Ezekiel's spirit shook inside him. He felt the air grow heavier, as if the universe itself was bending toward a single point. The sound of the storm rose higher, the fire burned hotter, the thunder of wings grew louder. The wheels spun and the eyes blinked, but all of it was leading to one thing: the throne. The figure seated upon it. The question pressed into Ezekiel's heart like a blade. If the guardians of the throne are this terrifying, and the wheels that carry it see all, then what will happen when the one seated above reveals himself? The storm burned above the exiles, and Ezekiel lay face down in the dirt, trembling, his body broken by the weight of what he had already seen. The fire, the wheels, the unblinking eyes, it was enough to crush the spirit of any man. But the vision was not finished. The sound began low, almost a hum. It swelled quickly, building, expanding until it shook the ground beneath him. It was not thunder rolling across the skies. It was not the roar of wind. This was something far more alive. It was the sound of wings. Ezekiel lifted his head slightly, just enough to see the four living creatures spread their wings above the storm. They stretched outward and upward, vast and endless, touching one another at their tips, as if forming an unbroken canopy of power. Their wings moved as one, never out of rhythm, never colliding, perfectly synchronized. The sound tore through the air like crashing seas, like mountains collapsing, like an army of 1,000 chariots racing across the desert. Ezekiel's ears rang, his teeth rat to lead. His bones shook with every beat. He covered his head with his hands, but there was no escaping it. The thunder of wings was inside him, vibrating through flesh and marrow, rattling his very soul. And yet, even in the chaos, there was perfect order. The creatures did not move randomly. They did not flap in confusion. Their wings lifted and fell together in terrifying unity, like a single heartbeat. Wherever one went, the others followed, their motion flawless, their power unbreakable. Ezekiel's breath caught in his throat. He had seen armies march in perfect step. He had heard the chanting of priests, the cries of multitudes. But never had he seen such unity, such harmony, such terrifying precision. The sound was not merely noise, it was command. It was the echo of a higher will. And Ezekiel realized these beings did not serve themselves. They moved at the Spirit's command. Every beat of their wings, every shift in their bodies, every roll of the wheels was directed from above by a presence greater than themselves. They were the throne bearers of the Almighty. The fire blazed brighter, lightning cracked across the expanse, and the thunder of wings grew so loud Ezekiel thought the heavens would split apart completely. He pressed himself into the dust, his lips trembling, his body shaking, his mind screaming, "No man can see God and live. No man can see this and survive." But still the vision pressed him higher. The creatures moved as one, their wings filling the skies, their voices silent yet their sound deafening. And above them, the crystal expanse shimmered, glowing with light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Ezekiel dared to lift his eyes again, and what he saw nearly broke him. Through the blazing wings, through the thunder and lightning, through the storm itself, the throne was visible now. A seat of glory, radiant as sapphire, glowing in hues of deep blue and burning white, alive with fire and brilliance. It stood above the expanse, untouched, untouchable, sovereign. The creatures moved below it, the wheels rolled beside it, the wings thundered beneath it, but the throne remained still, unshaken, unmoved, eternal. Ezekiel's tears blurred his sight. His chest heaved with sobs. He was nothing before it, a man in exile, crushed and forgotten, now staring into the very heart of heaven. But the question that clawed at his soul was not about the creatures or the throne itself. It was about the figure seated upon it. He could see only glimpses, flashes of fire, outlines of light, a form too overwhelming to describe. Yet in those glimpses, Ezekiel felt both horror and comfort. This was no idol of stone, no statue of Babylon, no powerless god of human invention. This was living fire, consuming glory, power beyond comprehension. But who or what was seated there? Was it the God of Israel, revealing himself in fire and light? Was it his messenger, his presence made visible for a mortal's eyes? Or was Ezekiel seeing something beyond even those categories, something no human tongue could define? The thunder of wings rose higher, shaking the earth, drowning Ezekiel's thoughts. His ears rang, his body convulsed, his spirit cried out. He wanted to turn away, but his eyes were chained to the throne. And then, through the storm, through the thunder, through the light, he saw him. The figure. Ezekiel's mouth went dry. His vision blurred again, but this time not from tears, but from a brilliance that blinded him. The figure shone like molten metal from the waist up, blazing as if forged in a furnace. From the waist down, fire roared outward, unstoppable, consuming. Encircled by light, clothed in glory, wrapped in fire, this was no mortal. The voice came next, not like human words, not like sounds carried on air, but a voice inside him, shaking him, piercing him, ripping through flesh and bone straight into his soul. And in that voice, he was both judgment and mercy, terror and love, fire and comfort. Ezekiel collapsed fully, his face pressed deep into the dirt, sobbing, trembling, undone. He knew no man could endure this and live, and yet he lived. He breathed, he trembled, but he was not destroyed. Because the throne had not come to kill him, it had come to reveal. But reveal what? Why now? Why here? Why to him? The thunder of wings rolled again, filling the skies, shaking the earth. The storm blazed hotter, the fire brighter, the brilliance more unbearable. And the question thundered in Ezekiel's mind like the wings themselves. If this is the throne room of God, what message is he about to deliver? Ezekiel's eyes burned. His lungs ached for air. Every part of his body screamed to collapse and never rise again. Yet something greater than fear forced him upward, trembling, shaking, unable to resist. And there it was, the throne, suspended above the crystal expanse, radiant, terrible, unshakable. It gleamed with the color of sapphire. deep, unearthly blue, yet burning with a brilliance so sharp it cut into the soul. It was not made of stone, not carved by human hands. It was alive, radiant with fire, glowing with holiness. Ezekiel had seen thrones before. Babylon's king, Nebuchadnezzar, sat on one carved of ivory and gold. Israel's kings once sat on thrones of cedar in Jerusalem, but those thrones were dust compared to this. This throne was not crafted, it was eternal, perfect, unstained. The storm raged below. The wheels spun, the eyes burned, the creatures thundered, yet none of it touched the throne. Above chaos, above terror, above all creation, the throne remained unmoved, and on that throne sat a figure. Ezekiel could not fully describe him. Words failed, language shattered, imagination broke. He said only, "There was the likeness of a throne, and upon it was the likeness of a man." But this was no ordinary man. From the waist up, his form blazed like molten metal, glowing as though forged in the core of a star. From the waist down, fire poured outward, a living furnace consuming everything in its path. Around him was radiance like a rainbow in a storm, light so pure it both blinded and healed, burned and comforted. Ezekiel's body shook violently. He threw himself face down again, pressing into the dirt, unable to lift his eyes. For in that instant, he knew the truth. He was seeing the glory of the Lord. But how could a man see this and live? How could flesh endure fire? How could eyes behold infinity? And yet Ezekiel lived. He was not destroyed. Instead, he was undone, stripped of pride, of will, of everything he thought he knew. The throne was not silent. It pulsed with presence, with command. Though no words were yet spoken, Ezekiel felt the weight of eternity pressing into him, demanding obedience, demanding awe. He could hear the storm, the thunder of wings, the spinning wheels. He could smell the fire, taste the dust in his mouth, feel the ground trembling beneath him. But above all, he felt the gaze of the one seated on the throne, not just watching him, but knowing him. Every memory, every sin, every doubt, laid bare before the throne of God. Ezekiel's tears poured into the dirt. He was nothing, less than nothing. A man in exile, a failed priest, a broken soul. And yet the throne had descended for him. The Almighty had chosen to reveal his glory not in Jerusalem, not before kings or generals, but before a captive by a river. Why? That question burned more fiercely than the fire. Why would the Creator of heaven and earth tear open the sky to show his glory to an exile? Why reveal the sapphire throne to a man who had lost everything? Perhaps it was to remind Ezekiel, and all who would read his vision, that God is never confined. His power does not end when the temple is destroyed. His throne is not shaken when nations rise and fall. He is not defeated when his people are enslaved. His throne moves wherever he wills, unbound, unbreakable, eternal. But another thought clawed at Ezekiel's mind. If the throne can appear in exile, if the throne can move beyond the temple, if the throne can descend in fire and storm, then it can appear anywhere, to anyone, at any time. That realization chilled him more than the fire. Because what if this throne was not only a vision for him, but a vision for the end of time? What if this was the throne every soul would one day stand before? What if the eyes on the wheels that had pierced his heart would one day pierce every human heart, exposing every secret, every hidden truth, every sin? The figure on the throne blazed brighter, fire swirling, light consuming. Ezekiel could not bear to look again. He pressed himself deeper into the ground, his face in the dirt, his body trembling uncontrollably. And still the question thundered in his spirit. If this is the throne of God, and this is his glory, then what message will he deliver to mankind through this vision? The sapphire throne blazed above the crystal expanse. But Ezekiel's eyes, though swollen with tears, were drawn again and again to the one seated upon it. At first, all he could see was light. a brilliance that shattered language, a glow that made the sun itself seem dim. His mind fought to describe what he saw, but words broke under the weight of glory. He managed only this. From the waist up, his appearance was like glowing metal, as if full of fire, and from the waist down he looked like fire, and brilliant light surrounded him. A figure, human in form, yet not human. The upper body burned like molten bronze, radiating heat and brilliance. Flames flickered and danced from his chest, his arms, his face, so bright Ezekiel could scarcely endure to glance for even a heartbeat. From the waist downward, his form was pure fire, roaring, unstoppable, flowing like a living furnace. And around him was a radiance, a rainbow-like glow piercing the storm, beauty and terror fused into one. Ezekiel's spirit collapsed within him. Every fiber of his being screamed, "This is too much. No man can endure this." But he did not die. Instead, he fell on his face, his body pressed to the dirt, sobbing uncontrollably. He could not raise his head. He could not lift his eyes. But he knew, with unshakable certainty, that he was standing in the presence of God's glory. The fire did not consume him, yet it stripped him bare. Every doubt, every failure, every sin blazed before the throne. He had been a priest in training, a man born for holiness. Yet he had lost everything, his temple, his land, his calling. And now, before the blazing figure, he saw himself not as a priest, not as an exile, not as a victim, but simply as a man exposed before eternity. The voice came next. It was not sound, not air moving through lips. It was deeper, heavier. It thundered inside him, echoing through his bones, his blood, his soul. It was not merely heard, it was experienced. The voice shook him, but it did not destroy him. It terrified him, but it did not crush him. It commanded, but it also lifted. It was the paradox of fire, judgment and mercy, wrath and grace, terror and hope. Ezekiel knew at once this was not an idol, not a spirit of Babylon, not a dream. This was the God of Israel revealing himself in glory and fire, not to kings, not to generals, not to the powerful, but to a broken exile by a river. But why in this form? Why a figure of fire, half metas, half flame? Why human-like, yet terrifyingly beyond human? Perhaps to show that the God who created man was not distant from man, that his image bore reflection in humanity, but his essence was untouchable, uncontainable, unendurable. Ezekiel's body trembled violently. He pressed his forehead deeper into the dirt, but the vision blazed still in his mind. The figure raised no weapon, spoke no curse, yet his very presence was judgment enough. The eyes on the wheels had already stripped Ezekiel's heart bare. Now the fire of the throne burned through his soul, and the question pounded in his mind. If this is the glory of God, if this is his throne, his fire, his brilliance, then what message is he about to speak? Imagine Ezekiel's terror. A man in exile, crushed, forgotten, suddenly confronted with the throne of heaven itself, staring into the fire of eternity. Would the message be destruction? Would God declare Israel finished, abandoned forever, cast away into the dust of Babylon? Or would it be something else? A message of hope, of restoration, of warning and promise intertwined. The figure did not speak yet. He burned. He radiated. He thundered without words. His silence was heavier than speech, his presence louder than armies. Ezekiel waited, his face in the dirt, his soul trembling, knowing that whatever words came next would not be for him alone, but for generations to come. But pause for a moment. Ask yourself, why would the Almighty reveal himself in such terrifying brilliance to a single man by a river? Why not to the rulers of Babylon, to the kings of the earth, to the proud and mighty? Why to an exile? Perhaps because no king could bear it. Perhaps because only a broken man could survive the fire without being consumed. And so Ezekiel lay there, undone, waiting, trembling, knowing that history itself was about to turn. The fire blazed high. The throne shone brighter. The storm thundered louder, and the human figure of fire leaned forward, preparing to speak. And the question that held Ezekiel's heart in chains became the question for us all. When the throne of God reveals itself, will its fire be judgment or will it be mercy? The throne burned above the crystal expanse. The figure of fire sat immovable, eternal, terrifying. The storm raged, the creatures thundered, the wheels spun, the eyes blinked without ceasing, and Ezekiel, trembling in the dirt, waited. Then the silence broke. A voice poured through him, not like the words of men, not like sound at all. It was thunder inside bone, fire inside marrow, light inside thought. The voice of the Almighty. Son of man, stand on your feet and I will speak to you. Ezekiel shook violently. His body was broken, his strength gone. But as the words entered him, something greater lifted him, pulled him upright. He rose trembling, though he had no strength of his own. The Spirit carried him to his feet, and the voice spoke again. I am sending you to the people of Israel, a rebellious nation that has revolted against me. They and their ancestors have been in rebellion to this very day. Whether they listen or fail to listen, they will know that a prophet has been among them. Ezekiel's heart clenched. This was not a message of comfort, not yet. It was a message of confrontation. The people of Israel, God's chosen, had betrayed him. They had worshipped idols, broken his covenant, polluted his temple, and now they were in exile because of their sins. The fiery throne had not come to congratulate Ezekiel, but to commission him. He was to be God's messenger in Babylon. His words would not be easy. They would not be soft. They would cut like fire, shake like thunder, blaze like lightning. Ezekiel was terrified. He knew his people. He knew their stubbornness, their pride, their rage. They would mock him, reject him, threaten him. But the voice thundered again. Do not be afraid of them or their words. Do not be afraid, though briars and thorns are all around you and you live among scorpions. Speak my words to them, whether they listen or fail to listen. Ezekiel collapsed again, overwhelmed. The throne, the fire, the storm. It had not come only to terrify. It had come to a point. He was being marked, chosen, commissioned. The vision was not spectacle. It was calling. But still, the question burned inside him. Why such terror? Why the creatures, the wheels, the fire, the sapphire throne? Because this message was not Ezekiel's alone. It was not for one man. It was for a nation, for generations, perhaps for the entire world. The throne's glory was the reminder. God was not defeated. His presence was not destroyed when the temple fell. His power was not limited to Jerusalem. His throne rode the storm, moved with the fire, lived beyond walls. He was not the God of one city. He was the God of heaven and earth. And Ezekiel was to carry that truth into the heart of exile. The voice pressed into him again. Open your mouth and eat what I give you. Ezekiel lifted his head. Before him, a hand stretched out. A hand from the blazing figure upon the throne. In the hand was a scroll unrolled before him, and on it were written words of lament, mourning, and woe. Ezekiel's stomach churned. The words were heavy, dark, terrible. But the voice commanded, Eat this scroll, fill your stomach with it. And so he ate. And though the words were bitter to bear, they tasted sweet as honey in his mouth. Because truth, even when heavy, is life. The message was clear. Ezekiel was to speak not his own words, not his own thoughts, but the words of God himself, words of warning, words of judgment, words of fire. Imagine the weight of this calling. A man crushed in exile, trembling before the throne of God, now tasked to speak to his own people who hated the truth. Every word he spoke would be mocked, resisted, ignored. Yet he was commanded to speak anyway. And this is where the vision turns from ancient history to eternal relevance. Because the throne that Ezekiel saw still speaks today. Its fire still burns, its eyes still see, its voice still commands. The question is not whether the throne is alive. The question is whether we will listen. Ezekiel staggered as the vision pressed deeper into him. The fire consumed his spirit. The voice commanded his soul. He knew from this moment on his life was no longer his own. He belonged to the one seated upon the throne, But still the storm roared, the creatures thundered, the wheels spun, and the voice spoke again, heavy, final. Son of man, I am making you a watchman for the house of Israel. When you hear my word, give them warning from me. If you do not speak to warn the wicked, their blood will be on your hands. But if you speak and they refuse to listen, you will have delivered your soul. Ezekiel collapsed once more, his body trembling, his face wet with tears. He was no longer just a man in exile. He was a prophet, a watchman, a voice of fire. The vision was complete, but its meaning would haunt him for the rest of his days. And yet, as the fire dimmed, as the storm withdrew, as the creatures and wheels faded from sight, the greatest question remained. Was this vision meant only for Ezekiel's generation? Or was it a glimpse of the throne that every soul will one day face? Long after the storm quieted and the vision faded, Ezekiel's words still burned into the minds of those who read them. I saw a wheel on the earth beside each living creature. Their appearance was like a wheel intersecting a wheel, and all around them were eyes. For centuries, scholars, priests, mystics, and ordinary readers have wrestled with this question. What were those wheels, and why were they alive with eyes? To Ezekiel, the image was overwhelming. The wheels did not turn like ordinary wheels. They moved in any direction without turning. They were a wheel in stars, yet a wheel, intersecting, spinning, gliding wherever the Spirit commanded. What does this mean? Some say the wheels symbolize God's mobility, His throne not confined to Jerusalem, not trapped in temples, not limited by geography. Unlike idols that sat lifeless in one place, this throne moved. It rolled across heaven and earth. It followed His people even into exile. Others say the intersecting wheels symbolize the complexity of creation itself. Every force, every law, every movement of the cosmos interwoven, intersecting, controlled by the Spirit of God. To Ezekiel, who lived in a world of stone altars and brick temples, this was a vision of something cosmic, a God whose power was not local but universal. But to Ezekiel in that moment, there was no time for interpretation. The wheels moved with terrifying precision. They glowed like polished bronze. They burned with fire, and they followed the creatures without hesitation, as if bound to them by invisible chains. But the strangest, most haunting detail was not the wheels' motion. It was the eyes. Hundreds of them, unblinking, watching, alive. They stared from every angle, every surface, every direction. They blinked in perfect unison, and yet Ezekiel felt each one fix upon him personally. What do they mean? Some say the eyes represent God's omniscience, His all-seeing vision, His ability to pierce every darkness, to expose every secret. The eyes are judgment, stripping men of their masks, laying bare their hearts. Others say the eyes symbolize God's providence, His watchfulness over creation, His guidance of nations, His vigilance that never sleeps. Still others whisper that the eyes represent dimensions unseen, that Ezekiel was glimpsing not metaphor, but reality, a heavenly order where sight is not confined to one direction, but exists everywhere, always. Whatever their meaning, one truth is inescapable. Before those eyes, no man can hide. Imagine standing before them. Not one eye, not two, but hundreds, thousands. Each one penetrating, cutting, stripping away every excuse, every pretense, every lie. Imagine feeling your soul naked before a gaze that cannot be fooled. This is what Ezekiel experienced. The eyes of the wheels were not merely decoration, they were alive. They knew Him, they exposed Him, they judged Him, and if they could see Him, could they not see everything? Every exile weeping by the river, every priest mourning in Babylon, every soldier boasting in Babylon's palaces, every secret idol hidden in a chamber, every thought whispered in the mind. The wheels turned, the eyes watched, the throne moved, and Ezekiel realized this was a God who missed nothing. But here lies the question. Was this vision only for Israel in exile, or was Ezekiel glimpsing something far greater, the very throne that will one day judge the nations? If the wheels mean God's throne moves everywhere, then no one escapes it. If the eyes mean God sees all things, then no one hides from him. The exiles thought they were abandoned, forgotten. The Babylonians thought their gods had triumphed. But the vision screamed the opposite. God's throne was alive, moving, watching, ruling even in foreign lands. And if his eyes watched Ezekiel, they watch us too. For thousands of years, readers have tried to capture Ezekiel's vision. Artists paint wheels of fire. Mystics write about living chariots. Scholars debate symbolism. Some modern minds even whisper of UFOs, of machines beyond time. But none of it captures the terror of the text itself. Because the truth is this: the vision was not meant to be fully understood. It was meant to overwhelm, to silence, to strip away human pride. Ezekiel was not given an instruction manual. He was not told to explain the wheels and eyes. He was told to witness them, to tremble before them, to carry the weight of what they revealed. A God whose throne is living, immobile, all-seeing, unstoppable. Ezekiel's heart quaked. The fire blazed. The creatures thundered. The wheels spun. He collapsed again, pressing his face into the dirt. But the vision burned into his mind forever. He could not forget the eyes. He could not escape their gaze. And the question that haunted him still echoes to us. If the eyes of the throne can pierce every heart, what will they see when they look into yours? The fire blazed. The storm thundered. The wheels spun. The creatures roared with the sound of wings, and Ezekiel, crushed to the earth, knew this vision was more than a moment. It was a warning, a revelation, a glimpse into eternity itself. For the throne he saw was not a relic of the past. It was not chained to Babylon, nor limited to Israel's exile. This was the living throne of God, a throne that still moves, still watches, still reigns. And one day, all creation will stand before it. Centuries later, another exile, a man named John, imprisoned on the island of Patmos, wrote of his own vision, and his words mirrored Ezekiel's. John saw a throne. He saw living creatures with faces like a lion, an ox, a man, and an eagle. He saw lightning and thunder, fire and glory, voices and song. And around the throne, multitudes of angels cried, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come." Ezekiel's storm had not ended in Babylon. It carried forward through time, reverberating through history, reappearing in John's apocalypse. Two visions, centuries apart, but both pointing to the same reality. The throne is eternal, and it will not remain hidden forever. The exiles by the Chebar River thought they were forgotten. The Babylonians thought their gods had won, but the throne proved them both wrong. And so it will be at the end of time. When the throne appears again, not in vision, not in symbols, but in reality, there will be no more pretending, no more illusions, no more hiding. The eyes that once stared into Ezekiel's soul will stare into every soul. The wheels that moved wherever the Spirit willed will carry the throne to every corner of creation. The fire that once terrified one man will blaze before all mankind. No empire will stand against it. No king will resist it. No heart will escape it. But the most haunting question is not if the throne will appear again. It is this: what will the fire mean when it comes for you? For Ezekiel, the fire stripped him bare, yet it did not destroy him. It commissioned him, it purified him, it set him apart as a prophet. But for those who resist, for those who reject, for those who defy the Almighty, that same fire will consume. The fire is both judgment and mercy, both wrath and hope, both terror and comfort. Which one it will be for you depends on whether you stand as Ezekiel did, trembling, humbled, undone, or whether you stand proud, unrepentant, defiant. Never forget, this throne is not confined. It moved from Jerusalem to Babylon. It moved from visions to prophecy. It moved from Ezekiel to John. And it still moves today. It watches. It reigns. It waits. And one day, when the end arrives, it will descend again. Not in fire contained to a single prophet's vision, but in fire that engulfs the heavens and the earth. Ezekiel never fully recovered from what he saw. His life was changed forever. Every word he spoke afterward was marked by the fire of that vision. He could never forget the thunder of wings, the burning sapphire throne, the figure of fire, the eyes that pierced him to the core. And perhaps that is the point. The vision was not meant to be comfortable. It was meant to terrify, to awaken, to prepare. Because the throne that Ezekiel saw is the throne every one of us will one day see. The eyes will look into you. The fire will blaze before you. The wings will thunder around you. The voice will speak to you. And when that moment comes, the only question that will matter is this: will you fall before the throne as Ezekiel did, undone, humbled, ready to receive mercy? Or will you face its fire as judgment? If this vision of God's throne shook you as much as it shook Ezekiel, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with others, and let your voice be heard in the comments. And if you want more forgotten truths of Scripture brought to light, make sure you subscribe, because there are still mysteries waiting to be revealed.